Hey, everybody. We've got another podcast for you. We're talking sports. We're talking Raptors. Kyle Lowry is about to retire as a Toronto Raptor. Kawhi extension is looming with a change in representation. And DeMar DeRozan is being rumored to your Toronto Raptors. Apparently, the intrigue is coming from both sides. One from Mr. DeMar DeRozan, another from the Raptors organization. This is from Jake Fisher, who was first, if you'll recall, on the Kawhi Leonard Raptors reunion as well. Myself, Samson Folk, across from me or beside me, Louis Zatzman. The Bald Don't Lie graphic is up on screen. Louis, how the hell are you doing?
I am so fantastic. It has been far too long. I'm excited to be back with my fellow bald.
So I looked, it's been 7 weeks since you and I podcasted together. That's like not the longest. It's not the longest, but that's a decent chunk of time between the baldies. You know, there's that guy I told you about the other episode who goes around and touches his forehead to other bald men. That's what this podcast is.
So that happened to me, by the way. Since we last podcasted, I was at a wedding in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
And so I was on the bride's side of friends and the groom's side of friends who I've spent some time with, not a ton. There was a fellow bald who looked not dissimilar from me.
Yeah.
And they were very supportive friends. They were really like a supportive group of male friends. And at some point in the night, after some drinks had been flowing, he just came up and touched foreheads with me. We had a small intimate moment. Mm-hmm. So that's a thing, I guess. I don't know.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm overjoyed, actually. I'm also overjoyed. There's a news release that came out, or a press release that came out earlier today from the Raptors. There is a speaking engagement tomorrow for Bobby Webster plus surprise guest. Now, the surprise guest was, obviously, there's a big piece written by Michael Grange about this, where Michael Grange mentioned that, hey, Kyle Lowry probably retiring as a Raptor. Kyle Lowry probably having his number retired. And then Kyle Lowry says, hey, jackass, I'd like to do this myself. I want to be the one who spreads this news. We will put on screen for everybody Kyle's release. Now, there's not a lot of interesting stuff happening audio-wise. It's just some messages coming up on the phone. He's on his simulator for golf. He loves the damn golf. It's DeMar DeRozan. It's Pascal Siakam. It's Fred VanVleet. It's Damon Stoudemire. All the hits. He says, no, I'm not answering them. But then, at the end of it all, Louis, DeMar DeRozan calls, and Kyle, well, he just has to pick up. He is going to retire as a Toronto Raptor tomorrow. He is one of the most important, if not most important players in the history of this franchise. What do you make of Kyle finally calling it quits, but as a Raptor?
It's the season of feelings for the Toronto Raptors. The season of the past. For the present to matter, you have to have enough history to inform it. And the Raptors have reached that point as a franchise where we have the through lines where the producers of the show can start calling back, can start drawing on their own momentum. And Kyle Lowry obviously is the number one, not just player, but number one source of meaning, of purpose, of, yes, nostalgia, Alexander. And it is beautiful. I'm really glad we get to start the season out like this.
I'm really excited about it, man. And, you know, we're asked, where is it happening? It's at OVO Center. That's where all of this is happening. You could make the case if you put on a little bit of whether you believe it's reading tea leaves or whether you believe it is conspiracy, whatever you think it is, that there's a possibility that all three of Kyle Lowry, Kawhi Leonard, and DeMar DeRozan are present tomorrow, which I'm going to be there tomorrow. Kawhi Leonard is incredible in terms of teams I've covered. He's the best player I've ever covered. He's incredible. Kyle Lowry is the most meaningful player I've ever covered. And DeMar DeRozan was my first favorite player ever. For all three of those guys, the season of nostalgia, the season of feelings, it would be remarkable. And we'll get into some of the believability of the DeMar stuff, how that would fit. But Kyle Lowry, I think, should be centered first. It's really exciting, the idea of the greatest Raptor of all time returning home. Not only that, but the potential of a retired jersey, maybe even a statue. Where I'm curious where you stand on the rest of the accolades, because for sure he's signing that contract tomorrow and he retires a Raptor. We haven't had these kind of we haven't had the reason or a player of such standard to go down this road before. He is a first. I know Vince Carter, obviously, but that was a winding road, I should say.
It's the first one that ended positively. I mean, he is the first Raptor to have stayed all the way to culmination. He held that baby all the way to completion. And then he left without it being acrimonious, without it being either. It's just like the Raptors were going one direction. He wanted to have further chances to compete. It made sense for both sides. And he came back. And the Raptors have never had anyone like that. I think the Raptors, very unique franchise. The Vince Carter situation, there's other elements in sports like that, but it's, pretty fierce. The Kawhi Leonard, as you and S were talking about, just remarkably unique.
Yep.
But the Kyle Lowry of it all, equally unique, I would say.
I think even if Kawhi comes back this year, well, he's coming back. Even if he's back this year and he hoists the Larry O'Brien trophy for a third time in his career and a finals MVP for a third time in his career, it would still be, I guess, probably still more similar to Vince Carter's in some way because of the departure than it would be to Kyle's. Because as much as Kyle was a player who was rumored to be leaving the Raptors 17, 14 times or something like that, a little bit desire on his early on, and then the Raptors' desire intermittently throughout his career there. I think to have the one guy who was just here throughout, who was quietly defining a team that from the outside was defined by DeMar DeRozan for some people. And Kyle Lowry, a guy who was ahead of the curve on so much of what is popular now in basketball in terms of play style. I think he's a wonderful player, and he's a player who I think, quite frankly, teaches people about basketball as he plays it. He helps you inform what's important, and not just in a he dives on the floor type of way, but you watch the game and see what he values. And, despite, Blake saying, are we worried or are we concerned about there being enough balls for 2026-27? I'm not. But I tell you what I am concerned about. How you feel about how Kyle Lowry fit into, I guess, and helped usher in this era of the NBA, Lewis.
Well, it's actually interesting. You and Joe talked the other day about team building for the future. Kyle Lowry was always team building for the future. By virtue of his existence, the Raptors were positioned to target not just the present of what defines success in the NBA, but what will define success in the NBA a decade down the road. Yes, we are living in Steph Curry's shadow. In smaller ways, Kyle Lowry also defined what basketball means in this era by virtue of his pull-up triples in transition, of his absolute possession dominance. I mean, he was one of the early 2-for-1 guys along with Chris Paul. And now every team values the 2-for-1s to such an extent. I mean, Kyle Lowry was team building just by virtue of his manic obsession with winning on the margins, because it was the only way he could win. And the Raptors for so long lacked that, for lack of a better phrase. They didn't have a definition in the present or in the future. And the way that you and Joe said it, in that for a long time they were Vision 6-9 by virtue of necessity. And then the worry was some more talented team could carry that mantle across the finish line. But now, hopefully, the Raptors can be that more talented team. Now, hopefully, the Raptors can return to defining the future, and to do it at the same time that Kyle retires, and you can sort of remember what he meant for basketball, for Canadian basketball, for Raptors basketball, has a certain meaning to it.
Yeah. And also, as Blake says, I think Kyle also has a cultural impact as a guy who helped bridge analytics with the eye test. His impact was way bigger than the stat line, but if you watched him, you understood immediately why. That's kind of the cool thing too, is that there is obviously, and that's Blake Murphy, by the way, for audio listeners, there are avatars of the movement like Shane Battier, who spoke at the analytics conferences and had the Moneyball, I can't remember the author's name, but wrote the big piece about Shane Battier. And it's stuff like that. And it could be even, there are Raptors currently, it could be a Kyle Anderson. You could make the case for all these different types of guys. But Kyle Lowry was a guy who, by the eye tests, could perform as an all-star guard. And by the numbers and the analytics, could very easily, you'd make the case repeatedly that, and listen, I'm not here to debate it, just that you could make the case repeatedly that he was not in the league of Jeff Teague or Mike Conley, but rather he was in the league of Damian Lillard and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
And this was a benefit of, it's from Zacho's piece way back in the day when he said the Raptors front office, their, I guess, nascent analytics group said that Kyle Lowry is a top 10 point guard hiding in plain sight. And so they went and grabbed him. And now you look at how he has emerged as a player who is obviously beloved in many different organizations across the league, that his friendships span the league, that he's looked up to by a lot of young players. He has been a guy who has somehow harbored similar to Greg Popovich maybe, although different, a sentiment of lovingness and humanity while also being a very big-time hard-ass, gruff, yes. It's a special line to walk, I think.
Yeah, to Blake, it's funny. No matter how much you like watching basketball, Kyle Lowry play basketball, you will never love it as much as the spreadsheets love Kyle Lowry. Just he was as far as Raptors fans go, nothing meant being a Raptors fan as much as other teams, other fans being like, there's just no way he is the fourth best player in the NBA. And it's just like, there's a reason why everyone plays basketball today, like Kyle Lowry did 15 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever. It's just, he did everything that matters now. It's incredible. It's incredible the Raptors got to have that. And obviously what you're describing is just as important, and maybe even more important for tomorrow, right? It's not pull-up threes that matter tomorrow. It's that he meant so much to so many people. He was a mentor. A lot of veterans aren't mentors, by the way. Just because you've been in the league a long time doesn't mean you're a mentor. Kyle Lowry was.
Yep.
He has friends across the league, like you described. That stuff is really just as significant tomorrow as well.
Well, when we talked to him last when he was with the 76ers, the last time he's in Toronto as part of a basketball team, like 6 of the young 76ers gathered around for his scrum, just in adoration of this, past his prime star, sitting down to reminisce on what has been great and what has been fun. And he's kind with them and he teaches them. ND says Maxine loves him. Kyle's a very lovable dude. And since Blake is here watching, there's the famous Blake clip of Kyle, and Kyle has very famous interactions with media members. Do you have a favorite Kyle thing? Because obviously you have talked to him and you did cover him in his heyday.
Yeah. My first question I ever asked Kyle, I don't even remember the question. It was some benign. I was stressing about it. It was in a scrum in the locker room. And usually in the locker room, I would talk to Fred or Danny because no one really was talking to them at the time. And I could just chat with them. But for whatever reason, I needed a quote from Kyle that day. And so I joined this enormous scrum. and it was very stressful. I'd never actually talked to him before. And I wish I remembered what the actual words were, but it was the classic gruff, like, the fuck you talking about? Like, he's like, it was like one or two words. He was like, no, stop. It was some analytics question or something. He's like, no, try to win. Next question.
Yeah, that fits.
It was great.
Yeah. I don't have any. I arrived. It's also why
That's
I think
right.
it would be
You
cool.
arrived later.
It would be really cool. Like, I was covering the team. A lot of people listened to my work and read my work on the way to the Raptors winning their first championship, but I was not there, present to talk to these guys. And even I think I went to a practice with Blake in March of that year, and I tagged along, and I don't think Kyle was made available for comment that day. And so I talked to Nick Nurse, and I think Marc Gasol was there as well. Might have been Pascal as well.
You got a rare Gasol availability.
Yeah. And I do think, like, I have talked to Kyle, but it's just middle of the road stuff. And it's only witnessing special things with other people who Kyle has a nice rapport with. And I think that's one of the cool things. I like when the human aspect between the reporters and the players is evident, that that relationship is evident.
And to that, he got mad at Grange, obviously, for for breaking the news. He and Grange have a wonderful relationship. They actually really care for each other.
Yeah. I think it also wouldn't surprise, like, not Blake. Kyle loves doing that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
Since it was Grange, he was probably like rubbing his hands together, like, oh baby, I'm gonna get his ass now.
Yeah.
Anything else about Kyle before we move on to, I guess it's up to you to choose what's more interesting to discuss, the DeMar DeRozan of it all or the Kawhi Leonard of it all?
Also, to Grange, RR had that news as well, and
I don't want to implicate S, because I don't want to implicate him.
Anyway, I think DeMar. I think the through line from Kyle to DeMar is a clean one.
Okay. Yeah.
Also, shut up about my microphone.
Anyway. So, DeMar DeRozan is waived by the Sacramento Kings. There's been murmurs about this, and there's been fan casting about it, because obviously we are in the season of nostalgia more than anything I've ever seen with these Raptors. By the way, these past couple weeks of covering the Raptors, I'm sure of being a Raptors fans, for people watching, listening, paying attention, has been insanity. The amount of things that have been happening is like, it's absurd. And in a storybook type of way that you probably, if you were to think of it or put it into words out loud in front of people, Will Smith says it's borderline fan fiction. It is fan fiction, actually. It is well beyond fan fiction. If you had told somebody on, let's say, June 24th or June 23rd, so the Raptors, they're going to do the draft. They're going to pick a Raptors guy, of course, but then they're going to enter into conversations to trade for Kawhi Leonard to bring him back. And then also after that, Kyle Lowry is going to sign a one-day contract to retire as a Toronto Raptor. And by the way, they're also going to engage DeMar DeRozan on his interest in coming back at a minimum contract to play for the team. It goes beyond everything, because there are people who, when DeMar got traded, it was not necessarily popular. Everyone understood. But he has huge swaths of the fan base that love him and adore him. The idea to get him and Kawhi at the same time seems beyond the pale in terms of, like, you greedy, greedy bastard. That's just simply too much for some people. And yet, Jake Fisher reports that there is mutual interest between the two. DeMar DeRozan, let's set the scene. If he were to join the Raptors, what does that look like for you? Is there an optimistic look, something that you'd be happy with?
I'm more positive about it than I think I've heard you or your guests be about it.
Okay.
I'm actually pretty optimistic about the fit. So, Kawhi Leonard likely won't play in 65 games. I think 65 was what he played in last year, and that was his high in a long time. Obviously, he is older this
Not
season.
in a long time. He played 65, and then he was injured the year before, and he played 68 before that.
I stand corrected. But I think it would be reasonable to expect 55 to 65, somewhere in that
Certainly.
range. And I think the major takeaway from Brandon Ingram's tenure as a Raptor is that role definition is meaningful. And kids love routine. Sorry, I spent a lot of time with my kids this weekend. Basketball players need definition to hierarchy. And for all of Brandon Ingram's, inability to punch with other offensive, leaders, he acted as an offensive leader. Whether or not he was as successful as guys like Jason Tatum or Kawhi Leonard, he was able to take the job. And that really was successful for Scottie Barnes. It meant success for RJ Barrett, for a lot of other players around him. And yes, I think DeMar DeRozan likely would not be this type of usage player he was in past years. He likely would not be putting up 20 or 18 points a game, but he could give role definition for any group in which he played. You'd have to be careful. You don't want him really playing alongside Scottie Barnes and Kawhi Leonard. That would not be a good fit. But I think he could really offer punch in ways that Brandon Ingram did. I actually think the comparison between him and Ingram is pretty comparable in terms of what role and success within that role looks like. Also, DeMar DeRozan, since he left Toronto, has helped his teams offensively. Like his on-offs have turned positive pretty much year in, year out offensively since he left Toronto. And he's been playing more like forward roles. He's found success. He is not just like a washed former Raptor. He is a guy who still knows how to play high-level basketball and has been doing it for a long time. And I think he would really find a role in Toronto that would fit if he is amenable to lower usage, lower shot attempts. And the Raptors could use him quite heavily.
Yeah. I'm really curious about the fit. As I've said on past podcasts, I said with Joe, I'll be giddy if it happens. And I'm cheering for it, quite frankly. One, because what is my confidence level in the Raptors actually turning a minimum contract slot into something tremendous? It's not super high. And DeMar DeRozan guarantees a level of production out of a minimum contract slot that I think is a lot more than you're used to getting.
Yes.
This would also be maybe the first time in history for this team of getting a guy who just clearly could get more than a minimum and getting him in because the team is supposed to be good. Even when they were like really good, it was guys like Jason Thompson, guys like Jeremy Lin on the buyout. Like these types of guys do not come with as much cachet as DeMar. The thing that I'm worried about with DeMar is one, and listen, if you can guarantee it, you guarantee it. I trust the Raptors to do their due diligence on this. That role definition is really important. You can't bring DeMar in namby-pamby, and this is a guy who also low-key is probably someone who, if he doesn't sign with the Raptors, may go to a team where there's a certainty of some usage, there's a certainty of some level of shots, because, quite frankly, he's chasing an incredibly high location and spot on the all-time scorers list. And what's more meaningful to him, I couldn't tell you, but he could get to like Shaquille O'Neal level, which is an absolute absurdity if a team affords him the shots. Now, he has been dipping. He went, 24 2 seasons in a row. Then it goes down to 22 2 seasons ago, 18 last season. He's just 2.9 rebounds. The big thing with DeMar, the pitch, ND says he got to be okay with a 6-man role. He probably has to be okay with less than that, quite honestly, because CMB is set up to be the 6th man per minutes. And if DeMar has to accept less than that, probably. DeMar has an almost 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He scores regardless of context. He can score and move the offense along in limited offensive situations. The Raptors bench, if they are missing anything, it is wholesale creation. If I'm reading things correctly from where I'm at. If they do want guys like Colin Murray Boyles, guys like Trace Jackson Davis, guys like Jacoby Walter to have shots, in terms of bringing a guy in on the minimum, Jamison Battle as well. Who is going to be better at scoring on their own or creating those types of shots? I can't imagine anybody better than DeMar DeRozan. As ND says, is he willing to play faster and not be sticky on the ball? These are real questions that the podcasters, we're not going to get to sit down with DeMar and discuss this before putting pen to paper. But there's real upside here. The defensive stuff, DeMar is bigger. He probably is not going to be present on in a playoff rotation. Maybe he could be. But his size helps him in the regular season for sure, especially since the Raptors will be on average a larger team. Think of JJ Redick, Tobias Harris hanging in on those 76ers. Big teams where big guys can hang in. Allen Graves should benefit from this as well. All these things, to me, say that DeMar is probably worth more than the minimum. Could get it elsewhere. Perhaps it will be the Miami Heat per Jake Fisher. But DeMar, I think it's... I'd be excited and happy. And you could say that things could go sideways. He could become a malcontent or something of that. But it's not the Raptors to shore those things up before any of that happens. I think basketball-wise, there's a lot of reasons to like this, especially because the Raptors, if we're going to be real about basketball being played on the court, 2 years in a row, they had Garrett Temple, who is, and listen, we all really love Garrett. He's been essential to the locker room. He's a great guy, but has not really won at any level in his career, has not produced really a lot in his career, and was paid the minimum to help usher in a team. The Raptors are still young. They still need, I think Kawhi is going to be important in terms of being a presence for the younger players. Scottie is really taking that role. DeMar, if he really applies himself to this role, could be transformative. But all that stuff is up in the air, Lewis. I'm pro DeMar signing here for what it's worth.
I have one stat for it. Last year, just talking last year, isolations not including just end of possession isolation. So shot, turnover, assist. So last season, Brandon Ingram isolated on 14.2% of his possessions, scored 0.91 point per possession, a little over average, slightly over average. Kawhi Leonard, 17.9, that's higher, 0.98 points per possession, 67th percentile, pretty good. That's Kawhi Leonard. DeMar DeRozan, 19.6% of his possessions were isolations. That's top 10 in the league. And 1.03 points per possession. That's 80th percentile, best of the three. He is elite at that one thing. He remains fantastic at dancing in the mid-range. That's what Brandon Ingram brought to the Raptors, and that's what DeMar DeRozan would bring. He would not do it in the same way that Brandon Ingram did. He would not commandeer the ball in the playoffs from RJ Barrett, charging in transition and walk it down to throw up a contested mid-ranger. He would do it with a much smaller role if he came. The whole would he accept this role? If he's gonna come, you just assume they've talked.
Yeah. And the true shooting percentage. So 2019-20, it's 60. Next year, 59. Next year, 59. Next year, 59. Next year, 58.4. Next year, 57. Last year, 59.4. In terms of just a guy who you don't have to create shots for, which the Raptors are shy on in their bench, it really depends on, to me, if you believe in a jump for Jacoby, if you think that RJ's not going to get enough usage with the starters, if you believe Colin Murray Boyles is supposed to be some level of creator this year, if you think Kyle Anderson's going to play more into it, Allen Graves, whomever, it really depends on what you want to have happen. If you're a little bit hesitant on projecting out your younger players on taking a step this year, then DeMar, I think, makes a ton of sense. If you're really bullish and you say, no, we actually need to have possessions for Jacoby, that's really important to us this year, then you probably tell DeMar, like, maybe we don't have you on the team this year. But these are the questions. And,
Also,
Nahum says Jacoby is the one, Samson. If the Raptors believe that, then they probably don't bring DeMar on the team.
Amit Kumar, this is like Denver convincing themselves Westbrook was the answer off the bench at the minimum. He was amazing off the bench at the minimum. Westbrook was hugely valuable on a minimum contract for that team. In terms of production per value, the Raptors, like Denver in that season, have almost no money to give. Getting a guy who punches hugely above that weight, even if it's not a perfect fit, you can't bring in Jamal Murray on a minimum. Like, that's not an option. It's not perfect, but it's better than what a minimum contract would generally offer.
Yeah. And to that point, like, it's not, you could easily say Westbrook and became a problem in some sense. Sure. But they played him 28 minutes a game on a minimum contract. That's they didn't get to protect against Westbrook's worst things because they didn't have the talent to get what they were getting out of Westbrook elsewhere. So they opened themselves up to his whims as a decision maker, and some of that fell flat. And that is because Westbrook and Denver didn't have as clear guidelines of what role was, and because he was still so impactful, especially during the regular season, he elevated into a higher role within their structure. He started like half the games that year. So if Jamal Murray was more ironclad that year, maybe that doesn't happen. If Christian Brown or guys like this were more competent on ball, if Peyton Watson had taken that leap earlier, who knows? Maybe they don't need as much from him. But if the Raptors are playing DeMar 28 minutes per game, then I agree with Amit. There's no way in hell DeMar should be on this team. He should not be playing 28 minutes per game. If he's playing 12 or 13 and he's slick as hell, then sure. I think that's perfectly fine. And if he's okay with being a guy who falls out of a playoff rotation potentially. These are all big ifs and buts, though, Lewis.
There's a real possibility where Kawhi Leonard plays 20-something games next year, and he's healthy for the playoffs, and DeMar DeRozan is a real reason why they're in the playoffs to begin with. Like, that's possible. If Kawhi Leonard doesn't play in a ton of games next year, they need someone to define role. And a minimum contract to help with that insurance policy, hugely meaningful.
Yep. Hedgehog Food says, which elite teams have had a classic ball dominant / bad defense 6-man? Jordan Clarkson is the only one that comes to mind. Keldon Johnson is pretty close to this. Also, because Trey is not on the podcast, I asked Trey, please send a voice note I can play on tonight's pod regarding DeMar DeRozan potentially being a Raptor.
Drake is not the fucking GM. Bring that boy home.
That's so Trey is very pro.
He is
DeMar.
So better at podcasting than I am. Oh my God. What a superstar.
Yeah, he's the best of the best. So obviously Trey is big on it. That's where we are with DeMar. Potential downsides. Let's go to potential downsides. Do you have any immediately that come to mind?
I mean, you have to cut him, and people make fun of the franchise for a little bit, just like the Clippers after they had to cut Chris Paul. And does that really matter? Did that really matter for the Clippers? I don't know. You have some you have some bad headlines for a while. I think that's the biggest possible downside. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Actually, I think that is a real downside. But I do think Raptors fans, if the team is so good that they're just like shedding themselves of DeMar DeRozan, or so bad that they're shedding themselves of DeMar DeRozan, the problems are not about DeMar, probably. They're probably, it's something else that is amiss or awry. ND says, think it could be a massive distraction with the whole sentimental things. Me personally, I doubt it highly. Like, I really highly doubt it.
That's us, the media and the fans. If the players are that bought in on the whole sentimental thing, on the Kyle Lowry statue, that's a problem separate from the sentimentality.
Yeah. I think there's I don't know. The DeMar stuff is that he can't play a lick of defense, and he is the string that breaks repeatedly, and which probably it wouldn't be that severe in the regular season, but if he's the string that breaks repeatedly, he's completely over the hill, then their defense doesn't work. They struggle a bunch. Maybe his craft is not quite as sharp. Maybe there's a little bit more of an athleticism drop, and maybe this is the year that he finally drops below like 59% true shooting, and maybe he turns the ball over more because he's lost a step. Like all this kind of stuff, it could not work. There's reasons for it not to work. And also in the same way, if I'm going to preach, how Jamison Battle can be like a lineup chemist because he provides, decently quick feet on defense, size, and a total heat pump in terms of shooting and cutting, and that's why he would work in a lot of different lineups, how the Raptors want to play, then you could make also the case that DeMar doesn't bring a lot of those things. So, and you could make the case that he certainly wouldn't be a chemist. It should be an expectation that he'll be carrying these limited offensive lineups. He'll have an okay amount of responsibility thrust on his shoulders. That's the pitch for why it could go awry. And then I also know that there's the cultural reasons, which I don't really want to, we won't get into, but we'll state cultural reasons, which is that Drake has a significant connection to the team. When he was on the broadcast was like, if they retire his jersey, I'm going to rip it down. And then DeMar said well, I like to see him try. It's a long way up there. And then there's a bunch of stuff around music videos, etc. 2-year-old beef at this point in time. So
has Drake been back on the broadcast since?
I don't know, but he's been around.
He got banished.
I don't know if he got banished, but
from the broadcast. It's from the broadcast.
You think Matt put the hammer down? You don't talk about my guy DeMar like that, Drake. We don't do that here.
I think I don't know who the producers are, but I think they were like, that's not good television. We probably shouldn't have that. Or even the owners were like, we can't really have that. That's just bad for the brand, which I think it was.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, you don't want to tie everything into the, Drake's beef, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. That's where we're at with it. That's the DeMar DeRozan stuff, yes?
That's the DeMar DeRozan stuff.
That's the DeMar DeRozan stuff. We now have to talk about Kawhi Leonard, who is setting the stage to sign his extension with the Raptors. So from Shams, Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors are expected to start extension talks this week, and the two-time Finals MVP will do so with new representation. Leonard has hired Harrison Gaines, Esquire, of Slash Sports as his new agent. Esquire, by the way. Esquire. I've not seen that on I'm just surprised to see Esquire. Okay, I need your sniff test on the change of decision making. Uncle Dennis is out.
Yeah. A requirement. I mean, I don't think it changes the number. There's some guys who get their contract. Didn't Shea represent himself because he was like, I don't want to pay the percentage because I know what I'm getting no matter what?
I don't actually know that. That's cool if he did.
I think I might have that wrong, I would be shocked if Kawhi's agent really has a lot of negotiating to do. It's going to be a 2-year max, or at least very, very close, depending on what Kawhi is willing to let the team play with to add teammates. But if he just says, I'm only signing for the max, the Raptors sign him for the max, I assume. And I imagine the Raptors are like, this is total guess, not reporting. We want to negotiate with a different agent to do that.
I think it creates a nice line of demarcation, between what was. And so I'll say, the Rodgers deal just went through today. We're one of the pieces of Raptors media that is not affiliated. Anyway, the Raptors, in terms of wanting to rid themselves of quite frankly, the stink of corruption that hangs off of Kawhi Leonard. We're in the Raptors sphere right now. We, Raptors fans, Raptors analysts, everyone seems pretty jazzed over here. many people around the league, fans, etc., still look at Kawhi and co. and think aspiration. The reporting came out about Uncle Dennis and his demands being made of the Lakers, the Raptors, very similar to the Clippers, was even reported to the NBA, right? So if Kawhi leaving the Clippers and going back to Toronto is kind of, for the NBA, a governing body on its own, the ones who dole out the punishment, perhaps this really helps close things up in a sense of making good. You can buy into that or not. That's fine. The Raptors did pay a pretty hefty toll in terms of draft picks to make good. So whether you believe it or not, that's fine. Regardless of all that, it can't be Uncle Dennis coming to the table. Even if the decision is, this is how much a guy over 35 can make on a max extension. It can go this long. This is the rate it pays out at. Here's your $120+ million, Kawhi. Sign on the dotted line. The reports of you wanting to retire as a Raptor, you love it here, and you want to compete. We're satisfying everything. Let's sign and let's make it happen. That's where I'm at on all this extension stuff.
Based on what was reported, and afterwards, it wasn't being reported in 2019 that I saw, but afterwards it came out, Uncle Dennis was making some wild demands of the Raptors front office.
He's doing like Braveheart, like prima nocta. You know, he's like, I'm the guy. We do whatever we want.
He's like, you got a nice kid there. I want that to be my kid. Kawhi will sign if that's my kid now. It was like, you can't bring that back and just pretend that didn't happen. And whether that was Kawhi or not, it doesn't matter because Kawhi is the basketball player and you would put up with a whole lot to get that basketball player. But you can ask for the mouthpiece to be gone at least. And, you know, things were quite extreme in that 2019 negotiation. And even if it doesn't change a thing, it can at least mend fences aesthetically if the mouthpiece that did that is no longer around for this negotiation.
Yeah. You know, the vibe says, can you talk on the implications if he signs the max versus takes a slight discount in terms of the cap and team building options? So my understanding is that he's not taking a discount. And in fact, he plans to take the full amount. The team building implications, I think you would have to take a meaningful discount for them to start to avoid some of the cap stuff. And the idea of him taking one, let's say, a la Jalen Brunson or something like that, I just don't think is on the table. There is potential that he might waive his trade kicker because I think that affects the cap in some sense, but the trade kicker is paid by the Clippers, not the Raptors. So, but it still affects the cap, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think going forward, like his extension, the next available tool were he to take a discount would be like the full non-taxpayer exception rather than the taxpayer exception. You'd have, it's like, I don't know, double the amount of money for your MLE. So that's probably not correct, but somewhere around there. And that he would need to take an enormous discount just to open up that. That's not, I think, a feasible path forward. So I doubt he takes less money to allow the Raptors to build because it would need to be a lot less money.
Yeah. By the way, there's 500 people watching on YouTube right now and more on Twitter. Make sure to like the video while we're here. Helps more people see it afterwards. There's a lot of work coming from ourselves on the website and on the podcast. We're going to have myself and Josh will be doing a film breakdown on Allen Graves and Jane Bradley. There will be Kawhi breakdowns. We have a Kawhi breakdown on pace right now. Lewis, are you ready to talk Kawhi, how he fits, and get into the film room on all of it? All right, people, let's rock and roll. By the way, this will be getting cut into another video that will come out, I think, Thursday morning or Wednesday morning. S also has a Kyle Lowry video essay coming on the way too. So, hello, everybody. You're going to get 2 minutes and 16 seconds of unbroken video from myself, and then we'll talk about Kawhi. Enjoy.
And they're looking for hope.
What about you?
Redemption.
You know, in most of the best stories, a hero comes home. After being thrust into the lives of Raptor fans 7 years ago, Kawhi Leonard claimed stardom in very short order. He reached heights no Raptor has, and in fact, very few players in the history of the game have done what he's done on the court. It made him the most desirable player in the league for a short time, and that desire turned controversial, let's say. A departure to the south and closer to family, the Raptors lost one of the best players in the world, and honestly, a chance at a dynasty. It's safe to say, while there's no threat of not reporting to training camp, whether that was true or not at the time, he's still arriving now under unusual circumstances. But this time, he was the one who circled Toronto on the map, his desired location. The Raptors are getting an older version of Kawhi, yes, but one that is fresh off second-team All-NBA and 7th place in MVP voting. He set his career high in points per game while putting up the most efficient shooting season of his whole career. Yes, some of the athleticism has faded, but Kawhi has held steadfast onto his rugged physicality and even refined his shot making and decision making. The long mid-range becomes the short mid-range. The three-point shot accounted for a third of his attempts for the first time in his career. He spends less time at the rim, but he's been elite finishing at the cup when he arrives there. Despite already possessing Hall of Fame skills, he didn't neglect to polish his game. Looking back at it, there was bad luck for both the Raptors and the Clippers. Injuries, near misses, ill-timed cold streaks, you name it. Maybe a mirror was broken in the process of the move from Toronto to LA. If so, the penalty, 7 years of bad luck, has been paid. Kawhi Leonard makes his return, ready to chase a championship and a small piece of redemption in Toronto. Kawhi Leonard is a Raptor. He is a singularly talented player. He is probably going to sign a max extension for 2 years on top of his $50 or $51 million contract this year. Louis, we're here to break down exactly why he is doing a great job as an NBA player to this point and why he fits so well on the Raptors. We'll be getting into some of the film around how he plays with a traditional dunker spot player, how he plays with forwards who don't shoot that well. You can see these are facsimiles for Jakob Poeltl and Colin Murray-Boyles, and his transition efficiency. Of course, we'll also be discussing the replacing of Brandon Ingram, what that means. You have written about this. You have touched on this. I'm curious where you'd like to start first on the Kawhi Leonard of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I have very little to say that you haven't said in the last week about Kawhi Leonard. He brings Toronto everything that they've lacked offensively. I mean, he is just a born scorer. The number I pulled, he passed on 30.1% of his drives. That was near the bottom of the league. The lowest team percentage was 30.3. So he passed less than any team in the NBA. The Raptors were at 41.2, the 7th highest pass percentage team. They finally have someone who will drive the basketball to score. It is the first star player they've had who is able to do that in a long time.
He's unbelievable in doing these things. And we can put it on screen and we can talk about what it means for the Raptors to have a guy like this. But the cleanest way to compare this is putting him up against Brandon Ingram. And this isn't to put any shade on Brandon. It's just because they take a similar, if you go back to last year, they take a similar amount of dribbles. They have, obviously, Kawhi has a much higher usage. But you also wrote a little bit, Louis, about that comparison on your end. What do you think of that comparison for first things?
Yeah, I mean, he plays basketball in a pretty similar way, like in terms of play type outcome as Brandon Ingram. Like what gets logged in second spectrum or whatever. It's like, oh, that's a pick and roll that ends in a pull up. That's an isolation that ends in a post-up or whatever. But when you actually watch the basketball being played, Brandon Ingram can be pushed off his spots. He can be pushed from a 10-foot jumper to a 12-foot jumper. Kawhi Leonard pushes into his spots. That 10-foot jumper becomes an 8-foot jumper. He draws more free throws. He draws more fouls off the ball. He uses screens with like extreme physicality, whereas Brandon Ingram uses it with grace. You know, there's a lot of stuff that you really need to watch to see the difference on. Almost like Brandon Ingram is, like a horse, and Kawhi Leonard is like a truck with horsepower. They move differently, even if they're both being measured by the same, unit. And what that means is, yes, they're both mid-range players. They're both isolation players. They're both 2-point shooters. But Kawhi Leonard is so much better at those things, not because he has better touch on his jumper, but because the actual movements he takes to end in that result are just so much less sort of schemable, so much less stoppable, that it ends up with he is far more effective. That's why advanced stats love Kawhi Leonard and don't particularly like Brandon Ingram, even though it's like, oh, well, they both love mid-range shooting. Why shouldn't they be similar? But they're not. And it comes from not how possessions end, but the actual basketball that's played in those moments.
Yep. It's why Kawhi, despite, you could make the case that the amount of, he's usually in the 90th percentile and above in terms of how many mid-range shots he takes. A lot of people make the case that analytics says mid-range shooting is bad. This isn't the case. Analytics likes people who shoot well from the mid-range, of course. And in terms of how analytics are affected by people who play make in the middle, in my opinion, as someone who does a lot of film work, and I am definitely an eye test first analyst, the middle of the floor is the most dangerous place to play make from and to score from if you are proficient in it. This is exactly how Scottie, despite not having a pull-up three, used his tenacity, strength, and tact, and quite frankly, passing genius to drive offense in an NBA playoff series without much in the way of three-point shooting and without a freak-ass first step or something like that. This is why Kawhi is impervious to losing minutes, impervious to making teams worse, and he is unflappable in making his teams better. He is one of the truly transformative players across however many years in the NBA, not just because of his offense, but because of his defense. Now, I wanted to make the case for why I'm really excited about his fit with the Raptors. And I know there's a lot of hand-wringing about Jakob Poeltl. Lewis and I have done our fair share as well. I don't mean to, dissuade anyone from their feelings around that. I just want to make the case that Kawhi did a very good job of surviving Ivica Zubac's lack of spacing, traditional or otherwise, as a scorer, and should have no problem doing so with Jakob Poeltl. So I've put some film on screen, and I'd like to give everybody a peek into what it looks like and what Kawhi is able to do when he has more of a traditional big on the floor. So Zubac is setting a step-up screen for James Harden, and Kawhi is getting into a spot where he gets an empty side, basically, because Zubac is going to pull his guy away, draw a double. And this is the thing. This is the one thing you can critique Kawhi for. It's insane that he doesn't give Zubac the ball here. Absolutely insane. The one critique of Kawhi is that he does not play make very well to his bigs. Instead, Norman Powell flashes middle and takes what is ostensibly, I think, a much harder shot. Now, the big thing about Kawhi is that even though he misses some playmaking reads, he just doesn't turn the ball over, really, ever. Joe cited the stat that among Trevor Ariza, Ben Wallace, and Tony Allen, Kawhi is the only other player that has ever had more steals than turnovers in his career. And considering the offensive usage load between those four players, he is truly an anomaly. Now, keep in mind also, Kawhi Leonard scores 28 points per game last year, And he is a wrecking machine in terms of juicing your team's offensive output and the possession differential because of what he can give you on both sides. Kawhi is also a guy who's very capable at using small screeners to get into mismatches where he can get to the short mid-range. Another difference in terms of Brandon Ingram versus Kawhi here is that Kawhi is very capable of driving down mismatches deeper. He takes the short mid-range at almost twice the rate that Brandon Ingram does. Brandon Ingram can be goaded into the long fader a lot more often, and Kawhi is shooting across like the past 5 seasons, short mid-rangers at well above 50%. Again, the middle of the floor is very dangerous. These can lead to kickouts for 3 or an above 50% shot. This type of offensive output, it's remarkable, quite frankly. Kawhi is also a guy who is not shy at all in terms of getting his 3-point volume off, whether that is as a catch and shoot guy or whether that's as a pull-up player. It is a huge piece of how he scores the basketball. He can attack mismatches. He can shoot over them. He can do kind of whatever the hell he wants. In this way, and in the way he was when he was first a Raptor, he can be almost impervious to the offensive context around him. He can fit damn near anywhere. And this is like one of the most important things. As you can see, he gets pressured with, this big show, and then he attacks what isn't a mismatch, but just he sees attention, he pulls up, he hits shots. He's the Terminator in a lot of ways. And this is all with, and I put the film like this purposefully, and a not futuristically spaced floor. Zubac is here. He's in the dunker spot in most cases. If we're worried about the Raptors and looking to the Miles Turner of it all, or just not Jakob Poeltl is certainly not as good as Zubac, but in terms of how they're guarded down low, they offer similarities. Kawhi has very little trouble in the way of attacking bigs if he gets switched on pin downs like we can see here. The Raptors will certainly run pin downs for him. He has very little trouble in the way of running guard actions and taking guards deeper and scoring on them. He just has very little trouble in terms of getting to spots and scoring. If he gets too much attention, he's very capable of making the pass as well. He doesn't play make a ton, but he's certainly capable of it. You can also put Poeltl, who works out of the elbow and the higher spots on the floor a lot, as a hub. If you get a mismatch, you can use post-entry passes like we see Zubac giving Kawhi here. That's an end of shot clock attempt. We would have liked to see Kawhi take him deeper if he had more time. He'll do that as a Raptor as well. But the point being, Kawhi is so he's really hard to move off of his process. And his process is undergirded by such an elite level of shot making that having a traditional big on the floor, while you could argue, if you want to, that having a spacing big would be better, if you'd like to argue that, it's hard to argue that having a traditional big will make Kawhi a lesser player. That's where I am on the Jakob Poeltl fit. That's where I am with that. Louis, where are you on all of this?
Zubac was, for so many years, just an analytics darling for the Clippers. He won his minutes. He was important for everyone else winning their minutes. For the last 3 seasons, 2023 to 24 to last season, almost 3,000 minutes, Leonard and Zubac together, almost 3,000 Leonard without him. Offensive rating with them together, 121. Offensive rating with Kawhi without Zubac, 122. He does not need a dominant big to get his shots off. That's very different from most, pick and roll creators. He really has fewer uses of a big like Poeltl than most players with this role and shot diet. Now, on one hand, you could read that as beneficial for the Raptors because after Poeltl's injury, season last year, it might be meaningful to know you don't need to rely on him to that extent to unlock your best scorer. But it also means Poeltl could be something of an odd man out because it's easy for a spacer to fit in when they're not in an action, right? Like Miles Turner was never a 0.5 player. He just shot within 0.5 seconds. He didn't need to make decisions on that Indiana Pacers finals team. And Poeltl's not that either. So it's easy to see Leonard as someone who will help Poeltl it's easy to see Leonard as someone who might indict Poeltl and push him into the corner of the offense. If you're using him in delay actions, entering to the post hub for Leonard, on one hand, that'll work. On the other hand, it's like you could use him for better things, like there's more that this man can do. So it's go stand in the dunker spot, get the board if you miss. I mean, like that is a lot of what the role will be. It'll also be running pick and roll with Quickly when Leonard sits. So I think the Jakob Poeltl thing is a really interesting question, and I really like the film you have here. And I'm not sure. I don't know what way it'll go.
I'm really interested in seeing how we're able to transition different partnerships, because, I did this film like right away. And, once again, Caitlin put me onto this because she sent me the clip of this particular clip with Kawhi and Zubats. But I went and grabbed how the Cavs were playing the Raptors in the playoffs. Again, the Raptors didn't make their first pull-up three until game 3 of a playoffs. They took fewer than half the amount of the second last team in terms of pull-up volume in the playoffs and shot 10% worse, basically. They didn't have any of it. And you could argue that Quickly would help this, and I'm sure he would, but Quickly has his own drawbacks. And Quickly is mostly known as a shooter, and he still took about twice as few attempts from 3 as Kawhi in terms of pulling up. So the film here is just Poeltl is being that high hub on the floor, and he's trying to use his screening to punish the drop defense being played against him. The Raptors don't have the shooters to punish that, and so they go to, some post-ups and stuff like that, but Jakob wasn't really reliable in terms of getting this. He can smash down and try and create these Marcin Gortat screens, but guys like Quickly and Jacoby Walter are not going to be able to make use of that to finish at the rim, or at least haven't to this point. Maybe a guy, actually we know a guy like RJ can do that. Other teams were happy to let these types of plays with Jamal Shed, for example, as the shooter, become where the Raptors need to go and just forcing non-shooters to hit shots. At the very end here, it's a clip of just running a sneaky little play, a very simple play for Kawhi to hit a three-point shot over and under. There's a very easy synergy in some sense between Kawhi and Jakob Poeltl. But Jakob Poeltl, ironically, on this Raptors team, maybe not so ironic, but on this Raptors team, has been operating as a scorer a lot more than he should be, quite frankly. He's a player who, because the Raptors, their lead ball handlers, none of them are super high volume scorers. Jakob, despite leading the NBA in screen assists, also takes so many shots out of the pick and roll, out of pocket passes and things like that. So he has potential to help Kawhi. Kawhi probably won't play make to Jakob very much. This will be, in my estimation, a very one-way partnership offensively. Of course, Jakob can satisfy these things elsewhere, but I'm expecting a very one-way partnership between Kawhi and Jakob. Do you think I'm missing anything there?
No, and it never worked with Ingram and Poeltl last year. I mean, a lot of that is injury for Poeltl, obviously, but the Raptors were better offensively with Ingram on and Poeltl off than with both of them playing. Now, obviously, they were way better with Poeltl on and Ingram off. They had a great offensive rating in those minutes. But there is real risk that your best screener and your best ball handler and best scorer just don't have a ton of chemistry together. Now, fortunately, Leonard can weather that with ease. Like, he's Teflon in that regard. He, just quickly set a screen. He's going to get his buckets. But it does mean Poeltl's role on the team could diminish further.
Yes. So to the point of Kawhi just being a guy who makes things happen, these are the points per possession that include passes. So pick and roll, he was 89th percentile, 1.103. These are massive numbers. Post up, 1.242, 87th percentile, 64th percentile in isolation. All these numbers are higher than Brandon's, and in some cases, like exorbitantly higher. And while they may have the same sticking point in terms of neither of these guys want to make pocket passes to Jakob Poeltl, and neither of them have the seeing eye, unbelievable next level playmaker, dunker spot passes that maybe, actually we know Scottie Barnes has for Poeltl and for CMB, there's still like a super workable offense here with Kawhi. It will just look more ball handler dominant than screener dominant. And the Raptors, and looking at the synergy stats and their play type stats over the course of the past however many years, they've actually desperately needed somebody who is really dominant at scoring in the pick and roll, even if it's not as much a part of their offense as it is in other places in the NBA. Kawhi is a guy who that will be, I think, an extremely welcome addition to their offense. Now, this sets the stage, I think, for RJ to be subbed out early. I think this sets the stage for unique lineups that are like bench transitional lineups, and Kawhi might be a guy who plays a lot of minutes with a guy like Colin Murray-Boyles, in which case we need to see film of, in this first one, Brook Lopez is spaced to the corner. This isn't exactly representative of what we might see, but if they're running, like CMB in the dunker spot, let's say, and that's Jamison Battle in the corner, we can see what's happening here, for example. There's also film here with Ben Simmons. Now, CMB is much better than Ben Simmons currently, but Ben Simmons, when he's out there, gets guarded kind of similar to CMB. So we're going to run through the film. Kawhi is so good at avoiding digs, not turning the ball over, getting to his spot regardless of anything else, and he can drive it. He can shoot over the top. He can punch it on Donovan Clingan. He is one of the best scorers, full stop, in the NBA. And he's very capable, whether it's Ben Simmons in the dunker spot, whether it's Jakob Poeltl, Ivica Zubac, of just making hay while the sun is shining. Because for a guy who is so good, 54% in the short mid-range, so good, 37% on pull-up threes, so good, 1.242 points per possession out of post-ups, when he gets to the rim, he shoots 74%. It's true. 74% is a great number. But he can maintain his efficiency without demanding that Moses come and open up the sea for him so that he can part the sea for him so that he can get exactly where the efficient shots are. His shot chart is simply moved somewhere else where he can still maintain his efficiency. And if teams overload, his drive and kick game is definitely sufficient for what the Raptors will want to do. He is, I know we keep saying it, but has been one of the more undeniable scorers in the league. And you could see there even, it's like a pocket pass. This could very easily be Colin Murray-Boyles. It could very easily be Colin Murray-Boyles. And if the Raptors are going to play teams and be a unique team that has these 6'9" or 6'7" lineups where it's like 4 or 5 guys on the floor that size, we could see, I think, some pretty unique mismatches for Scottie to attack, for Kawhi to attack, and potentially if CMB brings the hard hat and is a little bit more confident offensively, for him to attack. Kawhi is he's been so impressive in this regard, Lewis. He just, every time I watch the film, I'm like, man alive. And like, listen, that's a Denver, they're not the most reliable playoff defense, but this is a very good playoff defense in a lot of these clips.
Kawhi Leonard is the first Raptor since Pascal Siakam who is just totally unbothered by digs and stunts.
Yeah.
I mean, Brandon Ingram really changed his approach to an individual possession based on where the stunt was coming from. Scottie Barnes doesn't really drive them. He did in the playoffs, but before then, for his entire career, did not. The Raptors don't have any guards who are at all capable of keeping their dribble through a stunt. Kawhi Leonard is just totally unbothered. Like, a stunt means nothing. He won't turn it over. He won't change his angle of his line or where he's going to pull up. He'll get to the spot, shoot over 2 instead of shoot over 1. It just doesn't matter. It means a lot. And yes, having Colin Murray-Boyles as a floor spacer above the break means you will have very aggressive stunts. And that really impacted Toronto's half-court offense last season. But it will not impact Kawhi Leonard's ability in those situations. He's Teflon for a lot of the problems that the Raptors suffer in the half court. They just don't bother him.
Yep. And to this point, so whether people like analytics or not, or catch-alls, if you like it, great. If you don't, that's just as well. But Dean Oliver, he put together this list of guys who, against really bad, average, good, and really good teams, the opponent quality is important here. And the the number that's being correlated on screen, like plus 2.4, this is very comparative to like Darko, if you're familiar with this catch-all
Yeah,
statistic.
what is the stat? Is this EPM?
It's a catch-all. I actually don't know which one he used. It's a catch-all similar to EPM, Darko, Rap'em, those types of ones. And so whether you buy into this, if you don't buy into this, just ignore this. That's fine. And if you do like it, great. We're not applying this. This is for food for thought. The guys who were really good against really good teams, in fact, the guys who were great against basically no matter who they played, you could see Jaylen Brown really struggled the better teams got by this metric. Donovan Mitchell, a little bit too. Cade Cunningham, yes. The guys who could not be bothered by team level on the other side. Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Victor Wembanyama, Kawhi Leonard, and get this, Karl Anthony Towns. This is champion, that's right. This is an extremely good sample size of players. And from what we know about Kawhi Leonard, from what we know about Jokic, SGA, and even Wemby, although there's limitations offensively, and Cat, he's not in the group with the other guys. These are like guys who could not be moved and guys who bring the hard hat and perform no matter what and have a significant history of doing so. There's finals MVPs here. And if Wemby doesn't bring a finals MVP home in his career, I may eat my hat that isn't on my head. This kind of stuff is truly so important. And it brings me to the other thing that I really want to get into. Another thing that the Raptors really struggled with is that they played in transition all the damn time. They were horrible scoring in transition. Kawhi Leonard not only played a decent amount of transition, even at his older age, but he was one of the best transition finishers in the NBA because he's great at dunking the basketball. Digs don't bother him, and he'll shoot threes. We have transition film on deck, Lewis. What is your expectation of, I guess, Kawhi as a transition utility piece for these Raptors?
Well, it's actually more than the sum of its parts. Like, yes, he is going to score a lot in transition more efficiently than any Raptor. But to me, he will unlock Scottie Barnes in transition because so much of Toronto's defense last year relied on Barnes being near the rim or getting defensive rebounds. And he was not, or often doing those outlet passes. He was not able to play in transition because of his defensive role. Kawhi Leonard can fill those roles. Like, he is an enormously talented defensive rebounder. He is fantastic at protecting.
One of the greatest all time in terms of wings, one of the greatest defensive rebounders ever. And a guy who scales up in the playoffs on top of that.
And Brandon Ingram, very good defensive rebounding year last year. I was really impressed with that part of his year. Not a great rim protector, not asked to play around the paint defensively. Kawhi Leonard can just slot into that spot and let Scottie Barnes start transition possessions further away from his own rim, so closer to where you're trying to score, and also not having to crack back for the rebound. That's meaningful. I think he won't just add with his own scoring. He'll do what great players do, across the sport of basketball in different areas. He will allow others to be better as well. There's a reason on-offs are more meaningful than just individual scoring. Because yes, your own scoring means something. But if you're helping other players score by virtue of being on the floor, that means something more. And there's a reason Kawhi Leonard has the best on-offs or close to them among anyone in the league because of things like this, right? It's not just, he's great at scoring. Doesn't turn it over. Gets steals. It's really, really small things. He lets his teammates actually play in transition on top of being great himself. There's so much. The deeper you go, the more you uncover. It's a diamond mine where there's just more diamonds in the mine.
Yeah. It's the banana stand. There's always money in the banana stand. There's always steals in the banana stand. There's always shot making in the banana stand. Kawhi is a guy who he's standing as a banana. Okay, so in terms of
like a banana.
Yes, in terms of the on-offs, Basically, historically, Kawhi, his team rebounds more when he's on the floor. His team creates more turnovers when he's on the floor. Do they play more transition? What do you think? Do they play more transition when Kawhi's on the floor? Yes or no?
Oh, recently,
I'll historically, yes, much more.
yeah,
In this way, I'm going to give a very funny comparison, Lewis. Very funny. So,
funnier than today.
the two guys who got traded for Kawhi Leonard, Brandon Ingram, we've already compared the similarities in play types for what they do. Brandon Ingram is not at all similar to Kawhi Leonard in how he impacts transition frequency, turnover percentage, or anything like that. The other guy in the trade did. Grady Dick, because of how he defended, limited as he was, how often he ran out in transition, and because of how he played offensively, Grady Dick doesn't turn the ball over because he's too busy jacking up whatever hell shot he wanted and missing a lot of them. Grady Dick ran out in transition all the time, so the Raptors played more transition with him on the floor, and they created more steals because he was peel switching and it was chaos when he was out there. Kawhi does everything Grady Dick did, but better. And he also does everything Brandon Ingram did, but better. I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, people, just to make the point that Grady Dick won so many of his minutes last year because of the style of play was complementary to the other guys on the floor. It's not through no fault of his own. It's through a little fault of his own. Kawhi is a guy who it is the fault of his own. He motivates the right style of play. He motivates the shot going in. He motivates the shot missing on the other side. He motivates basically all the right things for a basketball team. He motivates me to get really damn excited about this basketball team, Lewis. And to the Scottie Barnes thing, to the Emmanuel Quickley thing. If Emmanuel Quickley once again shoots 27% on threes in transition this year, I'm going to cry because he had so many attempts last year and he shot 27%. We can't have it, Lewis. Scottie Barnes hardly ever was the player in transition who finished after the catch. As we mentioned, because he had duties elsewhere, he was simply putting together Defensive Player of the Year candidacy and jump starting transition as the passer. When he was the guy who catches and finishes, catch middle and finish, he was shooting over 80% in transition. If Kawhi Leonard, perhaps, as one of the best rebounding wings of all time, is grabbing and hitting ahead, I suspect Scottie Barnes will be able to run at the rim a little bit more often and juice that efficiency there. In terms of having gravity as a ball handler to open that up, Kawhi Leonard, it's not just if he does the hit ahead. If he brings the ball to the three-point line, he should have some significant amount of gravity. If Scottie's going to run from the wing, we're going to see some numbers juice there. It just, all the stuff points in a certain way. Health is, of course, has to be qualified. But Kawhi, in terms of what is known and understood about his game, it's hard to find one weakness outside of, we pointed out, he may not service Jakob Poeltl as a scorer as often. And we started with that. I don't know why we started with that, but this is as clean a fit as I could imagine, really.
Yeah. It's going to be really, really special. They still need some things, but as currently constructed, there's no team they can't beat. Like, if they're healthy, if they have everyone on the floor, the Toronto Raptors, as currently constructed, are a basketball team with the guns to get in a shootout with any basketball team in the NBA and come out on top. It's the first time they've been that team for many, many years. The first time with Scottie Barnes on the team, the first time with any of these players on the team other than Kawhi Leonard the last time around. It's going to be remarkable watching how they play around their weaknesses, how they play up their strengths, because those strengths right now are the strongest the Raptors have ever possessed as a team, or not ever, but in many, many years.
Yeah. The Raptors have a chance at something special this year. And it probably gets harder to project something special with each year that passes, because Kawhi is 35, and that does mean something. And even though he's projecting to age per whatever metrics you choose at something along the lines of a Kevin Durant, so really still maintaining his offensive efficiency, he has the size and smarts and hands and arms to maintain at least some modicum of impact defensively for sure. This doesn't last forever, but I am gassed as hell for however long it does last. And I love that the Raptors went in and made this trade for Kawhi Leonard. Are there any final thoughts from you, Lewis, on this?
No, I mean, I'm really excited Darko Rajakovic remains the coach for this team. I think we're going to get a whole different public perspective on Rajakovic as a coach. You and I have maintained the faith for a long time. I think he is going to just have a phenomenal coaching season. He could very easily be in contention for Coach of the Year this upcoming season.
Yep.
It's like Toronto's put the foundation together for many years. There's a reason they thought they were ready for this trade now and not the Kevin Durant trade the seasons previous. They finally had something ready. And Scottie Barnes doing what he did in the playoff was probably the single most motivating factor for that. I mean, if you were excited
Kawhi
for
was
Raptors
watching
basketball, the NBA was, I mean, everyone was watching what he did. If you were excited for Raptors basketball after that series, which we all should have been, that was incredible, phenomenal, tantalizing stuff. To add Kawhi Leonard to that mix is just remarkably appealing.
Yep. Hoops a Lot says, how are you getting clips without the NBA stats markings? Where's the free video clip service? Share the wealth. I wish I could say I was grabbing these from Synergy. I loved when I had Synergy access. It made everything so much easier. I had to go scrounging around on YouTube for this, everybody. I spent like 5 hours collecting film for this today. So that's what I was doing.
Say you watch the games and just cut. That's what I used to do.
You think I was watching all of the Clippers games and clipping them? Yeah, that would be, I'm the real ball knower. Back when everyone used to do they'd keep track of all the games they watched, and they'd be like, I watched 83 games in the first 3 weeks. And I'd be like, how the hell did you watch 83 games? I'm that guy now. I watched it all. I clipped it all. Except the one clip I didn't clip was Kawhi hitting the 3 against the drop that Caitlin sent me like a week ago, because she was like, this seems interesting. And that is from her Twitter. Okay. That's kind of everything, everybody. There's a lot of people in here still. We're not going to keep going on, but while you're here, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Because again, not everyone dives this deep into stuff. And for this level of analysis, it requires a lot more work than just being reactionary and chatting. We, of course, do that too. But when we put in the extra work, one way to do it without paying, which you don't have to, is to hit the like button, subscribe, hype, all that good stuff. Then more people see it. And then Mountain Dew sponsors Pull Up Tray and Co. Lewis, any goodbyes?
Samson, goodbye.
Hell yeah. All right, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in with us. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy chatting about Kawhi Leonard. I've had so much fun talking about what this team could be and who could potentially join it. Kyle Lowry tomorrow. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.